Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel Nomad and welcome to what is going to be the very first day of Adelaide Writers Week. I am so excited, so ready. But today is actually going to be the Bookstagrammer's brunch or breakfast. So a few of the Australian Bookstagrammers and myself are meeting up to celebrate the opening of the Adelaide Writers Week, but really to explore how we can bring this absolutely wonderful event to all the lovely viewers on YouTube and Instagram. So stick with me, it's going to be a fun-filled day. We've got some free books given to us by publishers, which I will include in this video, and you get to see all the amazing things we were gifted. So first off, we're going to the cafe of choice, which is Peter Rabbit. Bag of books, but I'm coming in the back entrance today, so this is going to be the first day of Writers Week. I'm going to have a bit of footage throughout the day, and I just hope you enjoy coming with me.
And I did a diesel mechanics course, and so I'm okay on the diesel engine as well. But sorry, I think I've got completely off the...
No, it's quite
my
fantastic.
reading is about the sabotage, so should I read?
Yeah, that's a terrific idea. Let's hear some of this.
On that last evening, I remember crouching on my bare heels in the stony dirt of Faith Plantation and pressing a palm flat against Big Kid's calf, feeling the heat of her skin baking up out of it, the strength and the power of her, while the red sunlight settled in the cane all around us. Together, silent, we watched as the overseers shouldered the coffin down from the great house. They slid it rasping into the straw of the wagon and, dropping the rail into place with a bang, rode rattling away. That was how it began. Me and Big Kid watching the dead go free.
So predictability was really helpful for the survival of our ancient ancestors, and it was so important that evolutionary biology has caused us to permanently prefer certainty over uncertainty.
My great-grandfather lived in a village that was set upon by the Japanese during the war, and most of my family was killed. And the weird thing is, this was all in the book. I didn't know that it happened to my family until the book had been sent to my editor. It was on its way to being edited in the final rounds, and my father came up to me one day and said, I saw a person who looked like your grandmother at Temple. And I looked at him and said, gave him a look that said, you're being silly. And he said to me, that could be your grand aunt. And it transpired that the missing child in the story actually existed. And the missing child in the story is almost the same child as the one who went missing when the Japanese attacked my grandfather's family during the war. So the strange thing is he must have told me this when I was a child, and I had buried it away.
So for those that haven't read The Children's House, it's grown very much out of some of the stories of the people that I worked with in New York. That those stories don't belong to me, but it's about the point of intersection of my life and some of the lives of others. And one of the things I'm really deeply concerned with is when our lives sort of brush up against other lives and we choose to actually insert ourselves into other people's stories and lives, the repercussions are often things that we couldn't foresee and never anticipated. And then...
Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the few clips that I took from Writers Week this year in 2009. So I thought I'd go through very quickly the books that I read, because I didn't get to do reviews for all of them. I only did, I think, about 5 looking back, but I did read quite a few books, which made the enjoyment level so much more intense for this year's Writers Week, because I just knew what the authors were talking about. I had experience with the book, so it was just so much more personal experience as well. So these are the books that I read before and probably one during 2019 Writers Week. First off is Marcus Zuzak's The Messenger. I did do a review of this one, so I'll link it down below. Next, I did get signed, but I did also read Jane Harper's The Lost Man. My copy of The Lost Man isn't here. This is her second book, The Force of Nature, because my mum is currently borrowing it. But I did read it. Hugely loved it. The review is also on my channel, so I'll link that down below too. Another one I reviewed was Prize Fighter by Future D. Fidel. It was so fascinating listening to him. I actually won this copy. This one isn't a library one. It is a copy that I won from the wonderful Hachette. We did a bit of a pick and mix because Hachette was so kind to send us some lovely free books for all the Bookstagrammers, so thank you so much, Hachette. I will link them down below if you want to check out their books. Next is another one that was provided to us, and that was from Penguin Random House Australia, and that is The Children's House by Alice Nelson. This was absolutely stunning. The writing and crafting of each sentence is so meticulously beautiful. I thoroughly recommend it. It is just a gorgeous read. I should have really done a short review of it. I might still do one, but definitely pick this one up. I'll leave it linked down below. Next is another one that we were gifted from the lovely Hachette, and that is Now We Shall Be Entirely Free by Andrew Miller. I adored this book. It is a Regency book set in the 1800s, and it's a bit of a thriller mixed in with a bit of a moralistic tale of war, destruction, post-traumatic stress, and really coming into redemption and understanding where you belong in the world after there's a seismic shift in your reality. Next was Tony Jordan at The Fragments. This is an absolutely brilliant book because it is a bit of a literary mystery novel. So this young girl meets this old woman outside an exhibition for her favourite author's last novel that was burnt, and these are the fragments of them. But yet the woman knows a lot more about the novel that has ever been known before. So she starts to look into what happened back then and starts to uncover the truth of who really killed this amazing author and what really happened to her work. So it was such an amazing read. It's really quite short, and this is published by Tex. Next is one that probably needs no introduction because it's had quite a wonderful notoriety, and that is My Sister the Serial Killer by Okin Braithwaite. This was actually really fascinating because it's a very sharp, edgy style of writing, and it is very direct. And it really makes you question what is right and what is moral, and it's really interesting how it's presented. So it is on this year's long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I think it also rested on the Man Booker. I can't remember which other prize it sat on as well, but definitely a lot of notoriety, and it's very, very interesting. It's set in Lagos, and it was so interesting to listen to the author. So next is Washington Black. I did do a review of this one. I'll link it down below. Be sure to check it out if you're interested in reading this rather wonderful novel. And finally, Australian classic really, or to be an Australian classic that has got a lot of notoriety, is Boy Swallows Universe. I've been told by the wonderful US Watchers that it is soon to be coming out. I did do a review of this one. It is linked down below, so check it out if you're interested in reading a really unique Australian voice, and it's a story set in the 80s with a very wonderfully lovable young boy protagonist. Alright, so going through the ones that I'm currently reading and I have previously owned, that is Rebecca Mackay's Music for Wartime. It is a short story collection, but I got so wrapped up in all my novels that unfortunately this fell to the wayside. So still going on that one, absolutely loving it. It is so powerful, each story. I cannot wait to get to her novel. And of course I had to start You Daughters of Freedom by Claire Wright because she was so inspirational listening to her. She is an Australian historian who's writing about the Democratic Trilogy. So the first one is about Eureka, the Eureka Stockade in Australian history, and the women owners, tavern owners and entrepreneurs at the time over there. And then this is about women's suffrage and women getting the vote. It was quite a wonderful story of how it occurred in Australia, but then of course they took their fight on the international stage and went over to the UK. So this is absolutely lovely. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's just nice to sink back into a historical non-fiction. Alright, so that is all the books that I have bought previously. I have read, and I did get most of them signed, so I feel very lucky to have seen all these wonderful authors. But of course there has to be a book haul that comes along with this. So let's go very quickly into all the books from all the wonderful authors that I saw, and some of them I got signed throughout Writers Week. So starting off, Rage Becomes Her by Soraya Chemlai. This was such a fascinating session. It's on feminism, and they're really looking about writing the third wave or coming into the third wave, and how feminism is always constantly adapting, but it's never really changing its true motive, which is obviously equality for women and also equality between the sexes, which is a fascinating, absolutely fascinating read. And she was just such a vibrant speaker that I can just tell her voice is going to be absolutely astoundingly amazing to read. Another non-fiction is Axiomatic. This is by Maria Timken. This is looking at different social issues and traumascapes. She has written a previous one called Traumascapes, and this is actually voted on the Stella Prize shortlist. The Stella Prize is for women's writing in Australia, not just fiction and non-fiction as well. So I'm definitely going to get to this one, and she was a fantastic speaker. I went to her session about writing the Holocaust. Also at that session was Morris Leitzman. His book Once is hugely popular, and both of the other authors who were with Morris on that Holocaust session said that it's a wonderful way of introducing children to a certain part of history, the Holocaust, and how huge and encompassing that was, and not to scare the children, or actually to allow them to understand what really happened and the emotions that were quite high in the time. So I've never read this, and I'm quite willing and excited to get into it. Next are two books I got from Andrew Miller because I loved his other one. He's quite a slow writer. I think he's more character driven, and this kind of idea of creating character. So I got his book Pure, which won the Costa Prize a while ago, I can't remember, and also One Morning Like a Bird, which is set in Japan, so that was just an instant sell for me. But yes, so I got these two books, one signed, the other is not, because the other one was an impulse buy a few days after his session. Next I saw Ben Okri, who is actually the main speaker. He has won a lot of awards, Booker Prize winner for The Famished Road, but I got his book of poetry because the way he spoke was so lyrical, just in conversation. It was beyond brilliant, so I can't wait to read his poetry. I got Mental Flight, and also his latest book, which he was promoting, called The Freedom Artist. And he's really looking at a concept of society that we are really imprisoned really within society we imprison ourselves with certain expectation and values and social standards when everyone can't meet them. And so who is the prisoner? Is it someone within the walls or just within society? So this is a really fascinating concept, and definitely looking forward to reading it. Also on the feminist panel was Sarah Henstra. Her book The Red Word, I've been hearing quite a lot of hype around it recently. It's good and bad hype, of course, but I'm quite interested in reading this one. It was also on the panel was Natasha Stock-Despoja, who was a senator in Australia, and she just released a book on violence. I didn't get that one, unfortunately, but it was really interesting because she was writing about domestic violence, and the really sad thing was on the date her book was released on domestic violence, another woman in Australia went on to the tally of how many women had been killed by domestic violence in 2019. So very relevant, very pressing matter that has to be addressed within society. But The Red Word is actually more on rape culture, especially within a college system, I believe, but is set back in the 90s. So it's looking at probably another area of feminism as well, but looking at how feminism has always been in the same cause. So it's quite an interesting one, and I really want to get into it. I saw Hwang Sok-young. He's a Korean author. It was so amazing to have him out. His novels are hugely popular now. I have been reading a lot of Japanese translated fiction, not much Korean, so this is my first foray into Korean translated fiction, and they have the same translator, and it seems to be hugely popular. He was a very cheeky, wonderful, he was a very cheeky man when he was being interviewed, but it was so interesting to hear his concepts because he's always trying to address some social problem within society. And of course, Korea doesn't take too well to what he was saying, so he's been in jail 3 times for his writing and his protests, really. So the first book is Familiar Things. The other one is At Dusk, which is his latest release, which he was promoting, and the other one is Princess Bari, which is looking at more of the tension between South Korea and North Korea, and set in the guise of a fairy tale. So please, that was just an instant sell for me. Next was The Book of Dirt by Bram Presser. This is a very interesting one as it's in a way loosely set on Bram's own grandfather's story. His grandfather was rumoured to be the curator of the lost race in Prague. He was said to be ordered by Hitler to curate Prague's Jewish sector and ghetto and things like that to be a monument to what Hitler was believing to be the destroyed race. So this is going to be really interesting. I've read some very good Holocaust fiction and how it addresses different problems, but this is more setting the story straight in Bram's terms. Next we have Queer Stories. I didn't go to this session, but it sounded amazing. There was a lot of performers performing all their different editions of these stories. This is reflections on the lives lived of the LGBTQI plus community within Australia, and it sounded like everyone had a wonderfully good time, but I didn't go to that. I went to the other session that was on. And the other session was promoting How We Disappeared by Jing Jing Lee. This is set during World War II in Singapore as a girl is captured and taken to the military brothels for the Japanese soldiers when Singapore falls to Japan. I'm really interested because the author actually wrote this book and found out a few days after it had gone off to the editor for after the final edit that this had actually happened in her family, and she said she must have had it told to her when she was young and forgotten about it, but it was present in her conscious. So it's interesting the effect of trauma or traumatic experiences or stories can be passed down through generations, and this sounds like a brilliant read. And my last purchase for Writers Week, as it has been quite extensive, was Baby by Annalise Jochimes. She's a New Zealand author, is getting a bit of notoriety because it is a bit of a Bonnie and Clyde, but also looking at the social commentary of women's bodies and rights within society, and it's very dark apparently, which is also quite intriguing. It was on the panel with Gleefully Wicked Women with the writer of My Sister the Serial Killer, so it was a really interesting pairing to see how the two female authors wanted to grapple with this idea of violence within a female orientated and a female led novel. Alright, so that is all of my books that I read during that time, but I'll see you next time. Bye!